Right. Amazing. Welcome to the grand finals of Western WSDC 2026. We'll start with a round of introductions. Before that, just a note of congratulations to both teams for making it all the way to the end, and we're looking forward to a wonderful round. We'll start with panel discussion. My name is Yang. I'll be your chair for this round. I go by he and pronouns. You may refer to us as the panel. Alongside me are four really wonderful panelists that will be judging together. I'll let them introduce themselves in the order of the tab.
Okay, hi folks. My name is Dean, he, him. Best of luck in the round.
Hi everyone, my name is Joy and I'm going to be one of the panelists pronounced she here. Good luck. I am so excited to be judging you all when it's midnight here from my country. So good luck.
Hi everyone, my name's Sitra, he, him pronouns. Good luck for the round.
Hi, my name's Tumai, she, her pronouns. Best of luck.
All right, amazing. All the rules apply. 8 minutes. Speeches will stop writing at 8 minutes 15. I unfortunately will not be able to send timestamps in the chat, but if anyone on the panelists would be able to keep time, that'd be great. Speakers are encouraged to keep time themselves as well. Please offer POIs. I'm sure at this point in this debate, like you guys are definitely familiar with the rules and will execute it perfectly. Other than that, I don't think there's anything much on our end. To begin the debate on the motion, this house supports fideism. Let's invite the first proposition speaker to begin the debate. Here.
Hi, I'm Katya. I'll be doing the first, and I'll be taking verbal POIs, please. And wait, let me just disconnect my headphones because they're.
In the words of a famous Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek, if you can name the qualities you love in a person, your love is no longer pure. Instead, you're loving the qualities that you can name. This can be applied to faith, this can be applied to fidelism. Firstly, to notes on frame, and then our first two arguments on social constructs and religious upkeeping. But firstly, on the framing, there is a lot already about fidelism in the info slide, but firstly, what is faith? It's a perpetual absolute trust and belief that something will happen, that something is absolutely true. You do not care as a fidelist to evidence. If you're getting contradictory evidence, you probably do not doubt in this concept. But you also do not need convincing in order to believe this is true. It's something you're absolutely certain of. And it is something that is always going to be good. You're never going to believe in the absolute existence of something negative. Secondly, the absence of fides is then the side of opposition. We believe that it is likely that still there will be certain belief in religion and people will still have certainty to some extent, but evidence will provide even more certainty that they already have. This can be indoctrination, this can be religious convincing, whatever it is. Let's go into the first argument on how it upkeeps social construct. The claim is that independence of proven truth is the only way in which people are able to believe in social constructs. First point then, the only way for an individual to be certain is through fideism. Why is that? Because it is firstly because we have limited knowledge that we can as an individual have. AKA, you're not able to rationally explain every concept you have. You can just physically not teach the rationality behind it. Therefore, you just have to believe that your Wi-Fi is going to connect to your phone and not know how the concept is going to work in order to function. Secondly, evidence alone is useless. Evidence doesn't provide anything. You need motivation to see evidence because it has a predisposition to be able to research. AKA, there's going to be a bias for you to be able to search for an evidence. Secondly, interpretation of evidence is important for you to be able to know how to learn this concept. This is going to go into the certain direction of a belief that you already have. Thirdly, faith in scientific method, as is given in the info slide, is important. Facts are dependent on one another, and you have to believe to some extent, as is given, to a fact in order to be able to depend another fact on it. I know there are some big concepts that we'll only do in the theory of knowledge, but let me give you an example here. Let's say you're dealing with the mind and body problems. The mind and body separate, or are they connected? You have to firstly, to research these, have faith in the material world in order to even be able to use a scientific method. That applies to every psychological research, every biological research in general. You have to have faith in the material world that you can, by the way, not absolutely be certain of in any sense of the world. There is no certainty in you knowing that you exist in this world right now. It can all be in your head. Sounds like a conspiracy theory, but when you're basing things majorly on certainty and on evidence, you have to have at least some extent of faith in order to be able to prove other evidence based on this. Back to the example. You have to have the faith in the research method that you're using and the logic behind your argument. All of those things you cannot prove with certainty, but you have to have faith in order to be able to have some knowledge, to have some certainty, to have some truth at all. Some in infoslight means that this exists only to an extent. But at least a small extent must be present for you to be able to have something be considered truth. Secondly, under the argument, you have to have trust into institutions that only comes from fideism. Things like money or economy do not exist, right? We have faith that they will come back, that money will come back and will circulate and will return to us. It's not money that has specifically the object that has material value. It is our assigned value that we are giving to this object that has appeared through time. But we do not only have faith into this concept existing, we also have faith in other people that they will also exist in this concept. If I believe in money but somebody else doesn't, that doesn't mean I can use the money still, because money is going to be stolen by that person. It's very important here that if you doubt, or at least majority of the population doubts in these concepts, they fail, right? Money can be copied or stolen. Concepts do not exist outside of the practicality of us using them, but we need them to function in real life because of the impacts that I'm going to list to you now. Firstly, because of this belief, we get concepts that differ us from animals. This is one: morality, laws, justice. All of these concepts we source from baseline of us believing in material world existing, in money existing. These do not exist if they are challenged, but we are still need them in order to be functioning practically. You get social systems like states and leaders. You trust that your leader is able to govern you and that you have to have some authority above you. You do not rebel constantly in order to be pursuing your true happiness because you believe in these concepts that are logicalizing your life. This applies to everybody, right? Not just in religion, but in the sense of everything. Secondly, the impact is that you're not having an existential crisis every day. You can just not explain some concepts, and if you just believe in some baseline of them existing scientifically, you're able to then still live with yourself. Before going to the second argument, is still a POI.
Yes, even in a world of rationalism, you still need not have absolute certainty. I can believe on balance of probabilities, it is more likely than not that the universe is real. I don't think that'll cause me an existential crisis if I can be reasonably confident, but not absolutely sure.
Right. But to be able to have some truth, at least some level of truth, you would need to be proving it. I think you disproving this is more likely, or at least to the same extent likely, than you proving that material world exists, right? And if you have a 50-50 possibility of material world existing or not existing, you can then go either way, with certainty, but with fideism, you're going to go into the way that is more beneficial to you, that you think is truly good. Second argument then on security in religion. One, why is this the only way to be truly religious? This is affirming the info slide, by the way. Firstly, because of consequences less, right? You're removing yourself from consequences if you believe in feudalism. If you need proof in your religion, you're assuming that there is going to be something in the future that is going to be a consequence, right? This is like Kantian concept. You cannot be certain of the future, therefore you cannot be certain of the consequence of a concept, and you should not be allowing this consequence to be determining the existence of the concept. Secondly, evidence means you need convincing, right? Religion cannot be proven or disproven. This would mean that in some religions, you would probably, like in Christianity, you would go to hell for just doubting. Therefore, the only way that you can completely associate with Christianity is never doubting at all. Thirdly, faith explains things evidence cannot explain. You cannot be religious at the same time and explain bad things happening if you do not believe in the truth and the absolute goodness of a God. Or you cannot explain things that seem magical, like Holy Spirits that people are apparently seeing, just evidence that would make you doubt your faith, but people feel shitty about doubting their faith. They do not want to be doubting their loyalty. Last point on this is then loyalty. So if you are not always completely believing in faith, if you in a religion, this means you have not always been completely loyal to a religion. You have needed to be convinced to some point. It meant that at some point that wasn't the truth, right? This is very bad for you because then you do not feel completely connected to this religion. Secondly, then, why religion is good? This is quite evident. Firstly, because of the community that it provides you. Secondly, because this is a purpose in life. Mind you, this only happens in Fideism, that your purpose in life is certain because it cannot be doubted by any evidence that can contradict it in the future. You can only, on this sense, be certain that forever and ever your purpose of life is going to be staying. And thirdly, you feel security in your religion, you feel security in your purpose in life, and you do not think that it can be doubted in the future because of this certainty, because you want people to be finding their purpose in life. You're going with the side of proposition.
Thank you. First proposition. Before we proceed with the next speaker, I realize we would be voting on the final speaker. So if teams can send their speaking lineup in the chat as well, that'd be really helpful for us to decide who gets FPS. Yep, that'll save time as well. While we wait for that, I think we can fairly comfortably invite the first opposition speaker to begin the opposition case as well. Here.
Okay, can everybody see and hear me?
Yes to both.
Okay. Is it okay if I record this speech as well?
Yep, should be fine. Teams that are offering POIs should be aware about the recording as well. But yeah.
Okay. Okay, she, her pronouns and verbal POIs, please. Debate is an activity that was born out of rationality and doubt. The reason why we can have open discussions about different perspectives is that we know that the call of this round could go either way, that there is no faith in whether this motion is definitively right or definitively wrong, that discussions can actually lead to change and that questioning is important. We're very First, I'm going to do some clash and then framing and then two arguments. First argument as to why we have the less questioning of authority and why fideism leads to less societal progress. The first thing I want to do is clash. I want to clash with their first argument as to why fideism is necessary for societal constructs. The first piece of clash is that proposition never explains to you as to why faith is the only way to access their impacts. So why explaining these things through logical reasoning or rational reasons is insufficient for people to go about their daily lives. Look at their own illustrations. For instance, they say you have to believe in the economy and the material value of money because there's no evidence for that. But we say there are multiple pragmatic reasons as to why money and the economy is good, that the economy prevents anarchy from happening, right? It means that you can fairly negotiate for the products in society and that you can also get a job and work for things that will increase your quality of life. There are rational reasons for why systems in society exist. But secondly, look at their illustration of belief in the material world. Descartes, one of the earliest philosophers, questioned his existence. He questioned whether the material world was even true. And the reason why he came to the answer that the material world was true was through logical reasoning. He first reasoned that he was certain that he was thinking, that he had these thoughts, and therefore he must have existed. Therefore, he was certain that he existed in the universe. Then he was certain that his senses were true because he had faith in because he believed in his lived experiences, that he could touch something, and that was a sense. And that's how he ultimately came to know that ultimately the material world was true. So we think that we can still access their impacts on our side of the house through reason. Second response to their argument is that we think lived experiences act to some extent as to why you believe the things in your life, right? So the fact that I know that the sun comes up every morning, that is my lived experience. The fact that I can touch things, that is my lived experience, and we think that can still guide societal constructs. And my other content will deal with their second argument. Okay, great. I want to go into some framing then. What do we think our comparative is? Two things. First is that there's some burden of proof that is needed for you to believe in something, right? So that during discussions, you need to give a reason for why you think something is true or provide evidence to justify your beliefs. Secondly, people can still form beliefs based on probabilities. We know that on balance, we probably won't be able to prove that the entire universe is true. Everyone in society accepts that that is beyond human capabilities right now. So you are still able to accept that fact, right? But also that things don't have to be 100% evidence, right? We know that there's certain things that we can't prove. People can believe that on probability, something is most likely to be true. Last is that we think that on our side of the house, there's still exceptions over different beliefs in society, as we see on the status quo. It is on their side that you lower the burden of proof and that faith is independent of evidence. First argument as to why you have less questioning of religious authority. First, I want to talk about why this leads to religious coercion. I want to illustrate how exactly Fideism applies in religion. Faith says that you have to have blind trust in order to access religious faith. That to be a child of God means to surrender, to fully believe even when there's evidence otherwise, that the path to religious truth is superior rather than other ones, like simply practicing your virtue but not believing in it 200%. We think the way this manifests is that one, this view is heavily preached by religious leaders because it is framed as the only way to reach religious truth. But secondly, that it is accepted and adopted within these communities. How exactly do we think this leads to coercion? On their side of the house, people are far more likely to be shamed for questioning religion or exploring different beliefs. And the reason why this is true is because first, you have less support from your community. Your friends are more likely to encourage you to just stick to what the pastor says. And the reason why is not because religious people just like do not have thoughts. It is that if the pastor tells you that Fideism and blind faith is the only thing that leads you to religious truth, your friends are going to encourage you to follow that and not question because they think that is what is best for you. That if you do otherwise, you're probably going to go to hell and they want the best for you. That is the same logic for why loving mothers will send their sons to gay conversion camps. So we think that means that your friends are less likely to encourage you to explore. You have less external support from the people around you. But secondly, that you have massive internal guilt. We think during puberty or during adolescence and in your early 20s, you go through periods where you are starting to reject beliefs from your parents and you're starting to find out what you actually believe in. We think for people in religious communities, that exploration is far more likely to be seen as negative on their side of the house. That doing a simple search of evidence as to why God exists and seeing that there's no evidence or counter arguments from atheists is probably shunned down upon because that is evidence that you are not actually blindly believing in God's plan. We think what all of this means is that one, people are much more likely to be coerced into religion, but also B, they receive far less support and become isolated in these communities if they genuinely choose to reject religion. That is incredibly terrible for people. Second part is that religious leaders have an incentive to push people to believe fully and to suppress thought, right? We think that for, maybe like 200 years ago, when religious leaders had malicious incentives, they incentivize you to essentially believe everything they're saying without question. That also leads to coercion. In society, we think this applies as well. People are far more susceptible to propaganda. Political leaders are able to leverage Fideism to explain why blind trust is necessary. Their side of the house is where populist rhetoric and populist leaders receive the most support because they have this grand vision of what society is going to be. And on their side of the house, they don't have to give you a list of reasons as to why that's true. People can be persuaded based off of emotion and belief rather than evidence. That was incredibly harmful for political outcomes. Before I move on, I'll take a POI.
Being convinced into something like an all-powerful good God looking out for you, making sure that you're going to get to heaven sounds like a pretty fun existence to me. Why am I going to feel worse when I have to believe in something good than when I have to be skeptical about the world around me?
Yes, but the problem is that that comes from a place of believing that religion is the correct belief for everyone. We think there are people in society that maybe would be better off religious. The reason why atheists are still able to be happy with their existence is because that way of life works for them. Their claim is contingent on proving that religion is best for everyone, even for people who are questioning and told that they should not question. Second argument is on why you have less societal progress on their side. Doubt and questioning is the basis of societal progress. We know that the earth revolves around the sun because Galileo dared to question. Doubt is the antithesis to faith and blindly believing in something without evidence. Why do we have less societal progress on their side of the house then? First, we think that doubt is framed as a negative thing, that you shouldn't doubt and that you should instead have blind belief. What are the implications of this? First on science. The reason why you have less science development is because science was initially seen as opposing religion, that it was questioning and not believing in God. The reason why this is important is that the majority of people who were scientific thinkers and early pioneers were actually religious. On their side of the house, you force those people to pick between science and religion even more than they have already done so in the past. That governments are far more likely to shut down experiments or research into science in the early days because people were told to question less. That was entirely harmful. Here's why this is not intentioned with the info slide then. Prop might say that belief in scientific progress still means that you get progress, right? The problem is that on their side of the house, the transition between believing in religion, which at the early stages rejected science, and switching to the belief in science is much, much harder when you are told that you shouldn't question in the first place. The second implication of why this is bad for societal progress is that there is a greater merit to sticking to tradition, that you have less religious progress, for instance, because religious leaders will ask why you are questioning scripture, that when scripture is outdated, for instance, aspects of the Bible that were initially homophobic, people are less likely to say that, we can accept new interpretations, or maybe just accepting that, look, when the Bible was written, it was outdated, and we ought not believe those things now. That results in less societal progress. Implications: in religious institutions, you punish specific groups more, but also as a society, literature develops less, science develops less. Our world is no longer the world that we know today. We're very proud to oppose.
All right, thank you. First opposition. Just a reminder, we're still waiting for the prop speaker lineup. But with that, let's also invite the second proposition speaker to continue the debate. Here.
Okay, just checking if everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Great. Just a second. But I think the world that we live in, where fideism is a concept that we all buy into, which is a narrative that drives our society, is a world where people don't have to worry about every worst possible outcome that can happen. Is a world where doubt doesn't eat you from within. Is a world where we can trust with the systems that benefit us pragmatically. Is a world where we can hope for good outcomes, even if the chances are not looking in our favor. We're going to talk about a couple of things in my speech. First is just personal interactions or individual interactions that I have with the world outside of me. Second, we're going to talk about the religion. And lastly, we're going to talk about our last constructive on optimistic mindset. The majority of the things that opposition talks about already feeds into the clashes from previous points. So let's talk about individual interactions with the world. Notably, this argument Kate already presents to you, is not about objective explanations and whether or not there exists a rational explanation for everything that happened. By the way, this is probably not true, right? We don't know everything. We don't know why the Big Bang happened. We don't even know how AI works, and we're the ones using it. I think there are a lot of things that we're just unable to know, and we have faith in those systems and faith in those concepts. So probably opposition has some concepts they're never going to be able to explain, because there just isn't a rational explanation for us to buy. But this argument isn't even just about that. It's just how much I, as an average individual on Earth with an average education, can probably understand around me. On proposition, we give you two broad areas of explanations around this. Number one is that I'm epistemically limited. I probably can't touch, smell, understand, or even conceptualize certain concepts because they're that unknown to me due to my education, due to just the experiences that I have been exposed to. That means that I probably need to have faith that allows me to save some doubt, to save me some existential crisis. I probably have faith that Bluetooth works because, I probably, as an 18-year-old girl that doesn't do STEM, probably don't understand how Bluetooth works. On their side of the house, where I have to, come to a logical conclusion and go through my doubts to understand every single concept around me in order for me to buy into the system, I'm just far more mentally occupied with things that are not really relevant to my existence. It doesn't matter why my computer turns on the way it does, and if I click a button, it does something else. I have faith in those systems. I have faith that, my laptop is not going to explode. This saves me so much of my life. Just not worrying about such things. These are just mundane things, but are things that, on their side of the house occupy you quite constantly and really decreases just your lived experiences. But secondly, we talk about systems. I must have faith into social systems. Katya already talks to you about this, right? Because humans have somewhat of a free will and we can do whatever we want. I'm probably never completely sure objectively, and given the chances we talk about, that people or the system will act the same way as it did the day before. That means that I probably need to have faith into, things repeating in action, or things staying in a stable manner, or I don't know, the economy or money or whatever we already talked about. It only really exists because we have faith that we are able as a collective trade money and it will remain in a possibly same value. There is probability, and quite a big probability, that the economy can at some point collapse because of a certain objective external force. I need to remain faithful that these systems probably can bounce back, even though it's likely that they don't. So I don't lose, stability in the economy. No, thank you. But just most importantly, I don't have an existential crisis. I'm able to trust and able to have faith into the better outcomes. And this is what saves me so much of my mental burden. Opposition tells us that, but I look at chances and decide which outcome is what the best outcome is. Yes, sure, but then I feel bad all the time because chances are that I'm more prone to being afraid of negative outcomes than I am of positive ones. We're going to talk about this in the argument a bit later. Opposition, fundamentally though, defends a world where I doubt things I really shouldn't doubt. It is now the practical implication of their arguments, right? You doubt vaccines because, again, mathematically or pragmatically, a vaccine for COVID in 2021 wasn't proven to be working yet, and I didn't have this. I didn't have certainty that this is something good. If I'm a person who is very wary of my health and I don't have trust and faith into the doctors that made these vaccines, I'm probably much, much more skeptical to shoot a vaccine up my body, even if pastors don't exist to me because I'm an atheist. I maybe doubt democracy because chances are I'm not going to change the system with my vote because mathematically I don't. But I have faith that everyone else will have faith in the system the same as I do, and then we all vote, right? I think on their side of the house, they're just a lot more skeptical about things, insofar as they don't prove that the skepticism turns into some positive outcomes, but rather just turns into hopelessness or very overwhelming doubt. I don't think they're able to prove pragmatic benefits for people. Then let's talk about religion. I think we already explained this enough in terms of organized religions, for they tell us that we're going to believe into more dogmatic things, etc. But it's not true, right? In our world, or where Fideism already exists in religious context, we still see changes, right? Churches are reforming. We see new branches because people precisely had faith that they can change the system and not, mathematically probably Reformation couldn't have happened, but people still had faith that they can change that, and they then were successful. This is also how you can get social change on our side of the house, because you as one individual have faith that you can actually change something, even though chances are you probably can't. But in some instances, you are going to succeed, right? That only exists on our side of the house. But we also talk to you about religion on a personal level. I put in more work to get into contact with God because it doesn't depend on some mathematical proof or some objective truth, but it depends on my faith. So I'm closer to God if I actually believe that he speaks to me, as opposed to just him being objective and isolated. If it's my faith that is connecting me with religion, I feel far more rewarded when good things happen to me, which means I just have a much, much more positive outlook on life. Lastly, let's talk about the optimistic mindset, which is largely already been engaged throughout my speech. Why is it more likely to be more pessimistic if we have a very objective view in the world? Number one, I'm just evolutionary biased to be very afraid of bad outcomes here over time. That means that if there's a possibility that I might die in a situation, I'm never going to do it, even though the chances are really, really small, because the bad outcome will be that bad. Second, I rationalize myself into thinking I'm going to have a bad outcome because I want to prepare myself for a possible disappointment. That means it is on their side of the house that I'm probably constantly in a very pessimistic mindset. Why isn't faith optimistic? We already talked about religion. This is quite intuitive, but it insists upon itself. As ironic as it sounds, it consoles me. If I trust in my faith, I don't need to be faced with a rational reality. I likely buy into this faith, and because it's developed as a counter mentality to this rational negativity we just talked about. The impacts then are quite intuitive, right? Even in the worst cases where chances are looking pretty bad to me, I have hope that I might get this issue solved. I have hope that my son will get cured of cancer, even though he probably won't. Then I have some hope that I can cling on to, even if when the situation is looking dire. And I think then this is a clear ballot for proposition.
Right. Thank you. Second prop. Speakers are reminded to take POIs when offered. That continuing on, let's invite the second opposition to continue their case. Here.
POIs verbally, please. Time starts on next word. When cavemen went hunting, it was their ability to question if using stones instead of spears or spears instead of stones would allow them to hunt down that goat and would cause that goat to respond differently. At the crux of all of society's evolution is doubt. Fideism itself is an invention of people rationally thinking about how rationalism sometimes fails. I think then it's quite clear that any societal advancement depends on doubt. For those reasons, oppose. In this speech, I'm going to ask a couple of questions in refutation and then move on to our team's final constructive argument. Let's talk now about refutation. The first question I'd like to ask is endless faith valuable? Let's look at the cases in which they try to justify endless faith. We need to have faith that the economy rebounds, faith that vaccines work, faith that your vote matters. Look at all of those illustrations. I think that there's tons of peer-reviewed studies you can look at. You might know that your one vote might not matter, but hey, the votes will add up over time, and so you have a duty to at least contribute to try to make a difference. All of the things in the illustrations they give can be justified on reason. We'll concede that faith means slightly stronger belief, but their burden was to prove why faith, instead of 80% confidence from reason, is the tipping point in people making decisions, which is clearly false. So if you have an 80% likelihood that something is true, and that's all the information you have to go off of, I don't know, I think most people would take the 80%. They try to tell you that endless faith is a good thing, but let's point out on balance of probabilities why it's not. Hannah gives you framing that goes unrefuted about who controls fideism. That is to say that society's most powerful dictate to us what we should have faith in, and I'm going to give 3 reasons why. First, there's the bandwagon effect. When other people in our life trust something, we are more likely to trust them because they've been right about other things. And so we follow popular beliefs even if they're not true. Second, you have a lack of alternative. That is to say that children are religious because they've never been given reasons otherwise by their parents early in childhood. 3, you have threats. That is to say that the church tells you that you're a heretic and will go to hell if you don't believe. The belief is not rational, but believing in it is rational and necessary. There's a pressure to never even consider doubting fideism, because in politics and religion, the more you question it, the less of a moral, virtuous person you are. This looks like things like faith in a capitalist machine that might fail, faith in the gender roles of society that we're trying to break from using reason about how there's no reason why there has to be this distinction in the first place. Second, why is endless faith bad? Because of a crisis of faith. That is to say that they're not proposing a world in which everyone lives under fideism. That is to say that many people, although mostly fideistic, have rationalist friends. They have rationalist societal messaging. And here's what the long-term damage is. That if you're fideistic and your faith is proven false because you get one convincing piece of evidence that finally decides to switch you from being unwavering belief into something more doubtful, you have a massive crisis where you have all this time in your life that you've wasted, this giant opportunity cost. It will plunge you into a deep depression because you don't know what is real and what is not anymore, because they think that the beliefs that have governed your actions for so long are a lie. We think then that we avoid that massive loss, loss that outweighs any potential benefit you receive from endless faith. And especially considering most of the time when they tell you to believe things, it's just because the powerful wants you to think that. I don't think that's something you should have endless faith in. Let's move on to our next question. Do all social constructs fall apart? This is their main constructive push. Couple of reasons why not. First, you don't need to have certainty. We think people cannot reason with certainty if God is real. This is why agnostics exist. It's why Reform Judaism exists. Because people believe that probably God is real. And the implication here is that people can believe in things and live virtuous lives by those beliefs, even if they don't entirely believe in it. Society doesn't collapse, religion still exists. Second, you need not believe in things that aren't pragmatic. It's highly unlikely that anyone has an existential crisis over whether or not we live in the matrix, because if we do, we can't leave it, so it doesn't really matter. Also, this is why Pascal's wager exists, for example, where people say, I should believe in God just in case so I'm not damned if I'm wrong. The implication here is that people will believe in the economy, they will believe in society and the government, even if they think it's intuitively a silly idea, because that joint belief, if everyone has it, is probably good for society. People believe in religion because it's fulfilling. We think people are still happy, still get that fulfillment on our side.
Yeah.
Social constructs improve in terms of them. I'll take you at the end of this. For a social construct to be effective, people have to believe in them, and they should be beneficial for the people who believe in them. But note that we live in a society where people have contradictory beliefs. In a world of fideism, you force these people to live together and live lifestyles in ways that contradict each other's goals. People, for example, live under capitalism and disagree with the system entirely. How do we win here? First, we get progress. That is to say that we doubt as much as we can, so we are more likely to approach an objectively correct answer about what society should believe in, and that objectively correct answer is usually one that more people are happier with, because our determination of what is truth is usually what most people want to believe. But second, we get compromise in cases where progress can't happen. I'll discuss that more in constructive. In terms of the claims about existential crisis, just consider how this all manifests in the real world. I don't think people are going to sit up all day in bed questioning whether the universe is real, because there's no benefit to them to do so. I also think that their rational incentives do not have your life be completely disrupted. So even in a world where we don't completely believe in fideism, people spend most of their time doubting the things that matter, like if they're making the right career or relationship decisions. But before I move on, sure.
It feels like a lot of points you're making are actually for a side of proposition. If people still believe in concepts that would evidentially be proven wrong, such as morality in monetary systems, how do fidelity and rationality differ on the side of opposition?
Because when we talk about belief in the economy, it's not that I think the economy is real just because I really think so. It is that I don't care if it's real or not. I think it is good for society, and that is a rational reason to believe it. That is to say that society will be better off with it, and I think that is a rational, non-fideistic belief. What would be a fideistic belief in this situation would be to say that our economic system should stay the way that it is just because, with no actual justification. A belief being good for society is justification in and of itself. They tell you about religion, but I think people participate better in religion on our side of the house when they're more likely to or less likely to get exploited. That is to say, because they're more willing to be rational about their religious beliefs, that they're not going to fideistically listen to every single commandment, even if it's one that contradicts their rational self-interest. Like if there's a mother that doesn't want to put their son in conversion therapy, but their pastor compels them to do so. I think that in this, on our side of the house, when people might still partially believe that God is real and religion is legitimate, but have also other rationalities about how they should treat their children, people can weigh those two things against each other and make decisions that are better for them in the long run. No, thank you. Let's move on to our team's final constructive argument about how difficult it is to live in a society with contrasting values. I think to frame this, society is a mix of both rationalism and fideism. Everyone exists on a spectrum, and because we have different lived experiences and different backgrounds, that brings us to different philosophies. The next burden within this argument is that fideism necessarily leads us to contradictions, because if people do not doubt what they value, their goals, their beliefs, or what have you, you're going to have contradictions, because to have faith, you need not expose yourself to experience or reason. We think that in a world of rationalism, because you want your beliefs to be true, you probably try to meet more people that are diverse, to learn from them, to engage in discourse, to maximize your knowledge, so that your beliefs that are rational are perhaps the most well-justified they can be. But in a world of fideism, you don't have to do any of that. This is problematic, because when people hold fideistic virtues that they cling to and believe in them like a social construct, society falls apart, because you can't have people believe such fundamentally different things. You can't have half of society believe in altruism, where they're giving themselves up to all the other half of the people who are egoistic and refuse to give anything back. There are massive contradictions. This is how you get a loss of faith and trust in societal institutions. How do we get this solved with rationalism? At first, people are more willing to be persuaded by one another, because rationalism means that there's no absolute certainty, so you can be wrong and it's not earth-shattering. But also, secondly, you're more willing to compromise, because it's a rational thing to do to maybe believe that your belief is 80% true, but not 100% true. Fideism doesn't allow for that, and so it doesn't allow you to compromise. We think this is good for society, because first, it allows, for society to progress, but also it prevents people from having absolute crises of faith and existential crises when they are proven wrong. And those crises often cause them to isolate themselves from other people in their lives. So for those reasons, then, we stand on opposition. Thanks.
Right. Thank you. Second opposition. To conclude the substantive part of the prop case, let's invite the third proposition. Here.
My Wi-Fi is working pretty poorly, so I won't turn my camera on. I'm sorry, but otherwise, am I audible?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, thank you. I'll only take verbal POIs. I won't see the chat. I mean, maybe I will, but like, just give me verbal ones, please. When Descartes plunged into his meditations, he realized he cannot understand the material world. He cannot reasonably or rationally come to a conclusion the material world is true. What they tell you is that Descartes reasoned out the fact that this must be the case, that he must believe in the material world because reason told him so. This is not true. Descartes' answer was God. Descartes said that God would never allow a man to be fooled by such atrocities like the world around him being fake. He said that something so evil and so bad could never be done by someone who he had faith with and by someone who is ultimately going to do something good. The solution to skepticism has never been to ask more questions. It has never been to get more answers. It has always been to admit that sometimes this is impossible and you need to believe in something. There are a couple of things that are going to happen in this speech. Firstly, I'm going to tell you on why faith in isolation is going to make you feel better. This is where most of our impacts manifest and are not responded to, bar one. Secondly, I'm going to talk about doubt and what doubt actually does as a social mechanism, either as a mechanism of progress or for you as an individual. Then I'm going to talk about religion and science. Let's talk about feeling. There are multiple reasons as to why faith is likely to make you feel happy. One, you always think that a good outcome is likely to manifest. How does this make you feel happy? Let's dive into the realm of psychology here. When I'm thinking about something bad happening, for example, losing this finals, and I try to just console myself on the fact, hey, it might happen. I don't want to have a crisis of faith at the end. I don't want to feel bad about it, so I'm just going to accept it right now. The only thing I do is mitigate the sadness I'm already feeling. I'm imagining myself in a bad situation and I'm imagining myself sad. On our side of the house, faith gives you a unique perspective. It lets you live in a world with rose-tinted glasses for just a moment where you can actually feel happy in a situation that might not come to fruition. This means that you're likely going to feel happy, at least for a moment on our side of the house, in any time of sadness. This never happens with them. Faith uniquely makes you feel happy. Secondly, Ida gives you plenty of amazing reasons as to why faith is likely to make you feel happy, as to why faith is likely to draw out optimism in you. It counters biological things like just the inherent pessimism you have, lets you live a life that is far more worth fulfilling. It lets you believe that something good is going to happen to you at the end, that even if you've made mistakes in your life, you aren't going to be punished by rational forces of cause and effect, but an irrational force that you have faith with is going to put you in heaven, and the ultimate good is going to be done upon you. That means practically that when you are at rock bottom, when you're depressed and when you're not feeling good, you're going to be able to think, you know what, even though all the signs are pointing in the wrong direction, even though it looks like I'm going to crash and my life is falling apart, it's going to be okay. I need to carry on and I need to keep living. This means that on average, I'm far more likely to be happy on our side of the house. Let's deal with the one opposite claim they have to this. They tell you, it's really bad when you have a crisis of faith. You're likely surrounded by people who don't believe in this, who are rationalists, and who are going to tell you that your faith is bad. Two responses. One, I think this is very unlikely to happen. Once you believe in something strongly, it's unlikely you abandon this belief. Secondly, I think people recognize that you're happy from your faith, so are unlikely to convince you otherwise. I think you can grant it to up here that some people who are going to have a crisis of faith are going to feel bad about it, but this is not going to be a lot of people. What do we prove here? We prove to you that in isolation, absolutely everyone who is a Fideist is going to, on average, feel far more happy than anyone who is not. Let's talk about doubt. There are 3 reasons doubt hurts, and it makes me feel bad. One, I cannot predict the future. I'll take you after this. I cannot predict the future. I do not know what outcomes are going to come, and I cannot make sure that the outcome that is going to come is going to be net positive. This means that it's going to be hard for me to think positively. It's going to be hard for me to not be sad about what my possible future could be. Secondly, I can't protect myself against my past. If I've had faith in something, this means that I've believed in it my entire life. If I start doubting it all of a sudden, this means that I'm going to have to start to question everything I've had so far, or even if I haven't had strong faith in it, I'm going to have to start questioning things that I've started believing. This is probably not nice because I realize I've believed in wrong things, so I'm realizing things I might have believed have been wrong. This feels bad. Thirdly, I just can't know everything, right? It hurts the fact that when I realize that I've learned a new fact, there's another fact that I need to learn to understand what I'm trying to learn about. When I first learned about communism, for example, I then first realized I needed to learn about dialectics. And after I had to learn about Lenin, and after I had to learn about Mao, there's always more to know, and I can never be satisfied with the knowledge I'm gaining because there will always be more. This means I live in a perpetual state of limbo where I can never actually be fulfilled with the knowledge I'm getting. I'm going to feel sad. All right. Secondly, let's talk about science and progress. This is where most of their positive case stands, and they do a good job trying to prove it here. Firstly, I'm going to tell you why doubt doesn't necessarily lead to progress, and progress not necessarily being good. There are two paths you can take when you're a doubter. One, you can rigorously throw yourself into research and try to make the best out of your decision, follow the most logical lines of analysis that scientists have put forward for thousands of years. But this is hard. They use hard language, words like extraporaneously, words like evolution, natural selection, gene mutation. I don't know what these words mean. I don't have the time. I have a job, I have family, I have kids I need to take care of. I don't have the time to learn all of these things. So what am I more likely to do? I'm more likely to go listen to someone who is going to give me an easy, down-to-earth explanation. Sometimes this might be a scientist. Other times it's going to be an anti-vaxxer. It's going to people who are going to say, hey, use your brain, use logical reasoning, and use the logic your mother taught you. All of the things that the government is trying to tell you are false. You're going to start believing bad things. This means it is unlikely or unnecessary that in a majority of cases this actually leads to progress. Before I move on, I'll take a point.
Most people in society are not Descartes. That is to say that while some people are doing the hard work of doubt, most of them are just listening to the findings of the thought leaders and interpreting them and whether they value them or not. I don't think people have to take so much time out of their day to philosophize as you suggest.
Exactly. What this POI has just said is that people have faith in certain institutions like science and are therefore likely to benefit from them because they have faith in them. They're likely to believe in the fact that scientists and those who doubt are going well and have faith in them to do so. Thank you. All right, progress. Let's talk about progress. They give you a myth about progress necessarily being good without actually impacting it. Progress can be bad. Sometimes we progress into wrong things. Maybe we ban euthanasia when euthanasia should have been there. Maybe we legalize something we shouldn't have legalized. Maybe we legalize weed when we shouldn't. I'm not sure why, even if this might be a good thing by some scientist statistics, progress is necessarily good. They don't weigh this or impact this at all. Secondly, I'm not going to tell you why science is easier to accept if you are faithful. Now, when you get contradictory claims to your faith, you're more likely to say, you know what, this is cool, I believe this might be true, but I'm still going to believe in my God as well. It allows you to have an out, to believe in two things at once, and to not see a science as something antagonistic. On your side of the house, a religious person who is certain to God is going to reject science, is going to say no, because they're scared that it's going to disprove their beliefs. More trust in institutions comes on our side of the house, you have less crisis of faith. Lastly, let's quickly talk about religion. I think most of this is touched upon in the first class already, when I tell you what faith is good, but I don't think they engage with religion properly. They say it's dogmatic and it indoctrinates you. You know what? Fine, let it. I would rather be indoctrinated into the fact that God is out there for me, that He has a plan for me, that He's going to do something good in the end, that I'm going to get to heaven. Even if this makes me a bit more conservative, even if this makes me a bit more dogmatic, at the end of the day, I'm far more likely to be happy because of it. Because, panel, you genuinely care about the happiness of the individual, and because it's far more certain you get this than the impacts that are floating out there of progress or anything else, you're very, very clearly going with proposition.
All right, thank you, third prop. To conclude the substantive portion of this debate, let's invite the third opposition. Here.
All right, can I just confirm that I'm audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just pull up a timer and then I will start. Time starts in 3, 2, 1. I think proposition has quite an extreme conception of what this world looks like. Yes, all knowledge to some extent might rely on an assumption, but there is a crucial difference between trust that is conditional and that is tested constantly, and blind faith that demands belief even when evidence points in the other direction. On opposition, we preserve the ability of people to think freely for themselves. We preserve the capacity for society progress. We're very, very proud to oppose. There's going to be three themes in this speech. First, which side gets more progress in scientific innovation. Secondly, which side has more social cohesion and better institutions. And finally, on religion and coercion, proving why we win on all of them. First, let's talk about which side has more both social and scientific progress. Proposition makes this core claim, and their core philosophy is that they want to be happy and just dance through life without having to worry about the things that they don't know, because doubt is hard. But notably, proposition has the privilege of doing that because these scientists whose shoulders we stand upon risked oppression and notably took the hugely mentally difficult step of doubt. Without people to take on that mental burden that they say is so difficult of being skeptical and doubting their beliefs, none of the scientific progress would ever been possible. Fideism erases that. Proposition then claims that science happens because of faith, and this is their strongest piece of refutation to our claim on scientific advancements. But this fundamentally misunderstands how scientific progress and innovation works, that you must question the world around you, that with fideism, people don't question phenomena that happens, even if it is slightly strange, because it doesn't challenge their worldview, that it doesn't bring an inconvenience to them, that you must doubt previous laws. So in fideism, people would blindly accept that previous beliefs are just true. For example, that God created the universe, or that the geocentric model of the universe, where Earth, the sun revolves around the Earth, is true. And so we would never reach the conclusions that we have today, that, there's a heliocentric solar system, for example. And finally, good science requires revision. Very, very rarely on proposition side of the house does a scientist succeed on their first experiment. And to be able to revise your experiment and to continue researching until you get to a good conclusion or until you get to a good theory means that they have to question their previous beliefs, means that they have to abandon their initial hypothesis and they have to challenge their faith in that way. So on our side of the house, I'll only question an anti-vaxxer who gives me information if I believe the evidence, the contrary evidence that I'm presented of vaccines actually being successful. Notably, they can't backtrack on this because out of proposition's first 30 seconds, they state that if you were presented with contradictory evidence, then you still stick with your original belief. But I want to weigh why this is true. Is it more likely that under fideism you stick to your original faith, or you have faith in new scientific progress? You have more faith in the current system, and this is more likely for the vast majority of people for two reasons. One, it's what you grew up with, right? It's the propaganda you've been fed by your government. It's the beliefs that your parents held. It's the things that your church told you. These are the things that people are surrounded with growing up. This is what they stick with. But two, people are risk averse, and so it is always safer to stick with your original beliefs under fideism when faith makes you a better human being. So the scientists on proposition are an anomaly who face mass persecution from fideists, notably Darwin and people who oppose religion when proposing the theory of evolution, for example, got huge amounts of backlash. Scientists in the Middle Ages got huge amounts of persecution precisely because they challenged the status quo. Sure, I'll take it.
On our side of the house, scientists still exist, and people on the ground have faith that these scientists are doing something good. It's not just about faith in God. On your side, your question...
Okay, we just gave you the structural reasons as to one, scientists might exist, but they are an anomaly, so that means they are more rare, and they have a much harder time disseminating their findings to the public because the public has faith in their original beliefs. Second theme, which side has more social cohesion and better institutions? Here's how people interact with the world on our side of the house, because proposition has a very extreme characterization as to how people in status quo think. One, people believe things to be true on probability. So most people aren't walking around just philosophizing all the time and just experiencing existential crisis after existential crisis, right? So I don't walk around in crisis all of the time because on probability, I believe that the universe is probably true. Maybe there's a 1% chance that we're all living in a simulation, but there's no value to me believing that. And on probability, the sun keeps rising. I believe that I'm probably a real person, right? I don't need 100% certainty, and this is why proposition's epistemic limits argument falls. In most cases, reason and faith can coexist if they don't clash, right? Most of the time, reason and faith might come to the same conclusion, and so I'm just going to believe that. But secondly, on institutions, I believe in laws because they are practically good. I believe in my government because it is good to me, and it would be better than the alternative, which is chaos and me being stateless or me moving to another state, right? However, I don't have 100% faith. If my government starts gunning protesters down, if my government's secret police starts seizing people from their homes and oppressing them and throwing them in jail, I will protest and I will lose my faith in my government because they no longer deserve that faith and that blind belief. On their side of the house, the protests, the revolutions, they never happen because people do not change their beliefs even when presented with alternative evidence. Notably, we are directly quoting Proposition First here. So blind social cohesion at the cost of unreasonable oppression is terrible for people. Opposition, notably, protects the ability for people to dissent. And we clash with proposition on things like revolutions and social change here. Only on opposition can people challenge their government when faced with evidence contrasting their original belief that their government would protect them. Third theme then on religion and coercion. Notably, in their argument on religion, proposition concedes that religion forces fideism. Here's why this is important. They can't just assert that religion is endlessly optimistic and happy, which is what their core case is hinged on. There are two reasons for this. One is that the world is not always optimistic and happy. Like your kid sometimes will get cancer, that people in your family will suffer tragedies. Zach's argument, notably, on the crisis of faith flips this, because when people's faith is as optimistic as proposition tries to push, and when the realities of the world contradict that, that is the moment in which they experience a crisis of faith, that is the moment in which they are hugely suffering mentally. But secondly, that there is belief in hell and punishment, right? That religion isn't always optimistic because it requires a belief in things like divine punishment, a requirement and beliefs in things like hell. And this is structurally true because authorities and religious authorities like to exploit that fear to keep the people oppressed and to maintain their power over their constituents. The alternative we told you was simple, that rationalism was a solution to suffering, that you might believe that you'll find a solution, but the true solutions to your problems came from rationalism and came from reasonability. They assert that a blind belief in religion is just good. We say the goods of religion stay on opposition and the bad parts of religion are far worse on prop. 3 reasons. 1, that you never know if your faith is enough, and so people feel guilty for not feeling enough faith, for not being a good enough disciple of God. Secondly, that you are more desperate to prove your faith when it's the only metric of which your devoutness is judged upon, and it leads to a rise in things like religious extremism. And 3, that authorities notably demonize those who show less faith and isolate them from the benefits of religion. Religion notably improves when it is questioned and held accountable. And this applies to other things as well, like politics. The church is better when it is accepting of gay people. Elections are better when you elect leaders who make good on their promises, not just ones who make the grandest promises we are so, so proud to oppose.
Right. Thank you. Third up, let's invite the opposition reply to begin the reply section of this debate.
Great. Can everybody see and hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I'm going to start this speech by talking about some meta questions that were in this debate. So what does this motion actually mean, and what does each side look like? First, what do we think our side of the House looks like? From the start, Prop's strategy was try to push onto us the burden of defending that people would question every aspect of their lives, whether they existed in the first place or whether they have the capability to experience happiness. We explained to you from the start as to why that was not our burden in the round. What we told you is that 1, and this goes unresponded to, that people are able to form their beliefs based on lived experiences. That in the status quo, we know that based on probability, certain things are likely to happen. That based on probability, from the fact that it has happened every single day in our lives, that the sun has risen up. or that, maybe our Wi-Fi has shortages, but on probability, it ends up working out. Our first response based on lived experiences explain to you why we as human beings construct our lives based off of memories, and why that was reason enough to explain why social constructs would work, why our lives would not fully fall apart because we become creatures of doubt and we start to question every single aspect of our lives. That was the clearest thing we explained to you on our comparative. They continually tried to push that onto us down the bench. I'm going to talk about why we win on two themes then. First, on the theme on society, and secondly, on the theme of individuals. First, I want to talk about society. What was our claim on progress? Our claim is that doubt and questioning is central to innovation, that inhibiting doubt means inhibiting exploration, that when you are told that you should have faith in religion or the existing institutions that are accepted by those in power and in society, you are less likely to carry out your own experiments. You are less likely to do research that actually led to every single medical and scientific discovery. And the myth here that went unresponded to is that many early scientists were religious, and this takes their case at their best. If their case says that religion is good and religion is pushed more onto people, we think that means that in the early days, when religion was framed as opposed to science, scientists were forced to choose between religion and science. And that just means that far more people will stick to their faith in religion, less scientific discoveries will happen. The reason I've been spending so much time on explaining our arguments is because there was so little clash against them. What were their responses? The first thing they say is that science is faith. This missed the entire nuance of our claim. Our claim is that in order for science to exist in the first place, people need to doubt. And enough people need to doubt so that sufficient amount of people are able to believe in that doubt, believe that things can change and that our faith should be shifted. That needed to happen, and that can't exist without doubt. That's secondly, that in order to switch from having faith in religion to having faith in science, you needed to have doubt. Like 500, 1,000 years ago, everyone believed in religion. It is very unclear as to how their side of the house expects them to shift into a blind belief towards science. We told you that doubt was needed for that shift between beliefs to happen in the first place. That was why our claim still stands. Secondly, under society, I want to talk about beliefs, right? So generally, what they tell you is that society needs faith to operate, that you need faith in the economy. What we explain to you here is that in certain cases, people can see that the economy is generally on net good for their lives. It is better to have the economy than to not have that. That explains why on the most basic level, society would still function. I want to weigh why our claim on societal progress was independently round-witting. All of their claims on individuals are downstream of our claim on progress. Judge, do you think that we could be happy right now if we still did not have basic medical discoveries? Did you think that we would still be happy right now if our scientific progress was pushed back 100 years? That things like vaccines they try to use as an example for their own side probably aren't even as developed in the first place. We think our society as we know it right now is dependent on science. That was the impact. Secondly, I want to talk about individuals. Their entire path to victory is that individuals are happier. Zach's third argument responded to this, and it received very little response. Zach's third argument was explaining the crisis of faith. While you get exposure to different perspectives during your life, and if you suddenly convert your faith, you are far more devastated on their side of the house. What this did is that it explained as to why we win on individuals as well. Finally, our stuff on religion is able to prove to you as to why we benefit individuals. Faith means that faith on their side of the house means that you believe things that are against your interest. That was our entire analysis as to why you believe things based on the people in power. If people still have to believe in religion, even when it oppresses them and they're not happy, we would not support that. We're very proud to oppose.
All right. Thank you, I'll reply. And to conclude what has been a wonderful grand finals, let's invite the proposition reply. Here.
Just checking if I'm still audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Listen, if the first scientists were actually religious, as they claim, then they had faith and they still did scientific progress, even though it might have clashed with their previous beliefs. I think we can have both on our side of the house. We're going to prove this. We've been proving this throughout in the entire bench. Before I go into faith, happiness, scientific progress, and religion as the main clashes of this debate, let's just flag something out. Opposition is quite unclear in the burdens they're proving. For example, to what degree does anything happen? Like, why am I doubting politics, but I don't doubt science? I don't understand what's the distinction between them. Why is it even good that I doubt? Or why is it likely that my doubt leads to like the good outcomes and the objective truth and not to whatever suits me the most in my current emotional state? These are all things that are quite unclear. I don't think they're able to prove their impacts, specifically because on all of these questions, we have positive analysis. And let's talk about it. How does faith make you happy? Three main things we talked to you about. Number one, that I'm prone to be more afraid of bad outcomes just due to my survival instinct than I am of looking forward to good things. In a faithless world of opposition, thinking about a positive outcome and hoping for positive outcome and just having this positive mindset is whatever. It doesn't benefit me in any way. But if I think about a negative outcome, I then prepare myself for failure and disappointment. They tell you that humans are innately risk averse, which means I'm far more likely to think about negative things all the time because it's what ensures my survival and probably ensures that I'm better off materially, which means I constantly probably feel afraid, or scared or just bad altogether. Second is that doubt makes me feel bad because there's constant need for me to be prepared to have my world shattered. So I have this constant mental burden. It doesn't have to be existential crisis every single day when I wake up, but just constantly I have to doubt everything that's happening around me because I fundamentally don't have faith in the most random things in my life. This is still a mental burden. It might be small, but it scales up in the last 19 years of my life. It probably has scaled up enough for me to have some bad consequences, right? Thirdly, I'm overwhelmed by all of which I don't know. Under opposition, I don't have faith that my doctor is smarter than me. On opposition, I need to have pragmatic evidence before they're able to treat me. And even then, I'm still prone to doubt that after. If that is not true, and they would claim that I'm still able to trust in science and I just pick the best outcome, then I don't think they can have the claim that people are then largely doubting religion or religious dogma. I think they then have to pick a lane and stick with it. They can't have both. On scientific progress, there are two main things that we are talking about. Number one, in the info side, on opposition, I don't even have faith into science and I need to think about it rationally. So every time as a scientist, I want to create something in science or tech, I don't have faith in findings of my predecessors. So I have to go back and basically rediscover fire to understand why certain things happen because I don't have faith in the research that I'm reading. I need to have pragmatic evidence that something is true because my rationale, I would need to have faith in my rationale being correct for me to just have rationality as my reasoning. I would need to probably see things and whatever, so I need to go really back in time. Or they don't explain why that wouldn't be the case, so it's quite unclear. Or secondly, I don't have faith into new tech because I don't understand it. What are the chances that genetic testing is a project by the government to take my data? If I'm lacking faith in good morality of humanity, or if I'm doubting politics, I'm always gonna revert back to my risk-averse natural state and refuse anything that is new to me. So even if we would have progress, it is quite unlikely that people would just accept it because we don't have faith in the people we perceive to be smarter than us because we doubt they're smarter in the first place. I think then fundamentally opposition cannot even have a claim to their impacts. But lastly, it's on religion. Besides the uncertainty of their case, just religion is far more coercive when it is not faith in God that is guiding me, but it's the objective truth that I was born into or raised into buying, right? If I'm religious on their side, I'm far more likely to buy into extremism because it is not myself who is guiding me, but it is literally my parents telling me it is true and I'm not able to doubt it, or I don't doubt it, and then I fall into all the harms that they talk about. It's a very, very clear proposition.
All right. Thank you, Proposition Reply. That concludes the grand finals. Thank you so much once again for both teams for a really wonderful display of debating. I think that should conclude the recording.